switch is actually like almost the if statements, because what the switch does is it chooses, actually it takes a condition and then also compares with the maybe like let's say the user input, and then it now returns a value. So we'll get to understand return values in functions. That's actually after we've done with the while, for loop, so and then also the do while. So the next thing we want to now look at the switch architecture. So actually with the switch, you have to maybe like first have a value. So you must have a value you want to check in, or maybe a user input. Maybe a user input you want to check with. Then you have to now come here, then you have to start switching these conditions. So maybe like conditions, yes. So maybe you have different conditions. So this is the first step. So this is actually like the first architecture of it. So you have to use the keyword switch, the opening and closing brackets, then your conditions you want to check here. So maybe like the condition or value. So let's say you have a value or a condition to check against. Then we do also have this opening and closing curly brackets. So once you are out of this, so once you start printing values here, so like now, like ended switch, that means that you are out of the switch. So you are out of checking the different conditions. So then the next other keyword we have here is case. So we have maybe like case 1, then maybe like your code here. So then the next thing, so once you are done with this external architecture, then inside this you have to have a cases. You have different cases. So maybe like the if, then else if. So these are the else if of the switch statement. So we have case 1. So if case 1 is not met, then we can now proceed to the next condition. So for the second case, so case 2, then maybe like now your code goes here. So this is actually like the basic architecture of inside a switch loop. So you have different cases, and then the last one, if none of the cases or if none of the conditions are met, then we have a default condition here. So like executed, so let's just say executed if no condition is met. So this by default will be like executed if none of the conditions, if none of the cases here are met. So this is just like the else statement in an if else conditional block. So let's say these are if, else, if, then else. Finally, this get executed if none of the conditions is met. Now there's one more thing. Once you've done checking your code or executing, you have to exit out of the loop. So you have to use something called a break. So you have to always break outside your case. So because if you don't break out of this, even if this condition is met, then it's going to proceed to the next. So let's say for this scenario, this is the last case you want to check before going to default. So if you don't exit, and even if this condition is met, if you don't exit with the break one, then by default it will proceed to this statement. This meaning if you don't break, you're telling the compiler, hey, I am not done executing, kindly proceed to the next line. So that's why it's going to jump into this. So the default doesn't have to break because it's the last statement. So basically this is what a switch architecture looks like. So let's maybe try print maybe number of days in a week or maybe a month. So let's do the one for months. So we can try print months. So let's say we want to switch now months. So we'll be switching based on numbers. So maybe for number 1, then we want to maybe like print January. Then for the second case, a user enters 2, then we would want to print maybe like February. Then we will have a default state if a user doesn't enter enter a valid input. So we can say maybe like invalid. Wow. So let's start by coding that. So the first thing we want to do is we want to check the number. So that means we have we have to have a value here. We have to check a number. So we're going to say like month number, then assign it to maybe like, let's give it maybe for now the second one. So this is an integer, of course. Then we want to maybe have assign some strings into our month. So we can say month, Then we can now, once we have our values or condition to check against, and then we can now start writing code. So we can now say switch. Then what do we want to switch? So we are switching based on these numbers. So if a user enters 1, then we would want to print down we want to set a value to the month. So we are going to switch the month number. So once we have that, make sure you have your opening and closing. Then at the end, we would want to print out the month. So the month is, so I didn't double quotes. So actually, like, the month is, then we attach the month here. So we would like now to start writing code. So this will now be our output. So let's say for the first case, for case 1, if a user enters number 1, then we would want to set our month into January. So let's say January. Then we have to break out of this. Then for our second case, that should be case 2. If a user enters maybe case 2, then we want to set our month into February. Then make sure you also break. Then for the third case, so case 3, if a user enters that case, then we'd want to set our string month into March. So let's just use that. Then we're going to break out of that. So I think you've already understood what I'm trying to do. So I'm just going to jump into the default one. So assuming that I've written up to case 12 where we have December. So I'm just going to jump into the default one. So default. Then I can say invalid month number. If a user maybe enters a month like 20, there's no month number 20. So let me run this and compile. Okay. So we have already set our condition to case number 2. So remember, case number 2, we set our month to February. So when we now print the month, then it would go into the memory address and fetch February. Then at the end of the switch, then we are trying to print the month, which will now be February. So if we run that, we now see that the month is February. Now, assuming that we add the third condition, so let's say for case number 3, where we have March, and then if you now run, so okay, let's just run so that we can now understand what I'm trying to do. So the month is March. So what happens in the cases where I forgot to add this break here, and we are just next to the default? So let's see what will actually happen. So it says invalid month, invalid number, then the month is March. So it's trying to execute this. The conditions was met. Then it because the conditions were met, then it assigned the month to March. So that's why we have this executed, and then we also have this executed, because we failed to tell the computer. If the condition is met, then make sure you exit out of that loop. Now, if you run this, then we expect that the month, this is only executed, and it doesn't actually proceed to the next line of code to check, because the condition was met, then we exit out of the loop. So basically, that was all you had to do, and you had to understand about our switch. So I want to give you one more task. So using the same scenario, I want you to like switch between the number of days. So if maybe like a user enters 1, then you can set it to Monday. So I want you to get a user input. I want you to get a user input instead of you outputting this. So I'm just going to like maybe get an input from the user. So int month. Then I'm going to say maybe like input. Then maybe enter number of month. Then I'm going to maybe like now store this into maybe my computer. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say cout. Then I want an input, so I'm telling the user that I want the input of the month, and then I'm going to store in this input into my variable. So I want you to figure out. So once you have this, so okay, what we can do is we can say maybe, so we can try to directly like int number. So we can say month number, then we assign it as input to our user. So what we are trying to do here is we just directly cin. So we want to directly store in the number, so we can directly cin the value. So we can say cin then month, so month num. So by doing this, so we are already getting this. So what we can do here is we can actually like break that into two. Then to make sure that our user understands what we really want from him or her, then we can say maybe like enter the number of month. So once we have entered this, then we want to see in this, then we can maybe like try to now so just remove that, run our code. So maybe if you now enter maybe 2, then it says the month is February. So let me just try and this let's have it in a new line. So so once we have that, so we can now say enter. So if I enter 1, then I have the month is January. So create the one that asks the user to enter the number of days in a week. So make sure you write that code, and then we'll meet in our next video.